Our next speaker is our friend Joti Brar, but she spoke at our conference in March, and we've had her talk and communicate with CPI in many different ways. But before she comes up to the podium, I have to tell you the circumstances of why she's here, how she's here today, because this is a little bit different than just Joti coming to give us a talk and talk about anti-imperialism. Her brother is facing very serious criminal charges in Britain right now, and his crime is handing out a pamphlet that the British police decided was not allowed. At an anti-war protest that was happening, the police were going from literature table to literature table, and they saw a pamphlet that was written by her father, I believe, called Zionism. We have it right here. Zionism, a racist, anti-Semitic, and a reactionary tool of imperialism. This pamphlet. And the British police saw this pamphlet on the literature table, and they put Ranjit Brar, her brother, and 3 of their comrades in handcuffs and took them to jail just because of a piece of literature they had on their table. Well, I am very proud to say we've got that pamphlet here today. We've got many, many copies of it. So someone should call up the British Police Department and tell them to fly over here and arrest all of us. And we are going to speak loudly in support of this. This is an attack on freedom of speech. And, I will also say that, there's a lot of talk about hate crimes legislation and no free speech for racists. And one piece of wisdom that was given to me is that you never want to give the power to your class enemy. You never want to give the billionaires and bankers that run this country the power to silence somebody because they think they're racist, or they think they're sexist, or they think their words are hurtful. We can't surrender our freedom of speech in the name of social justice. We can't do it. And we are here to stand with Joti. We are here to stand with her whole organization. Joti Brar is the founder of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, along with a number of forces, which we are proud to say we've signed on to the Paris Declaration of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, a very important development of international anti-imperialist forces. She's also the vice chair of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. We're proud to have her once again at a CPI conference. Welcome, Joti.
Yeah!
Thank you very much, guys. Caleb, you do the best introductions. Just off the back of what Caleb was saying, this was described by the imperialists, no less. Just think about the irony of that, as incitement to racial hatred. Okay? There's something positive in this. Well, there's 2 positive things. Number 1 is, your enemy is on the back foot when it has to dress up like you. Yeah. Why is it that when the ruling class is passing legislation to control us, they do it in the name of the aims of our movement? Oh, we want to protect women against sexism. Do you? Who knew? Newsflash. We want to protect brown people against racism. Wow. Who knew? So, yes, it's a big fat lie. It's just about control. It's just about shutting us up. It's about criminalizing dissent. But the fact they have to do it wearing our clothes, we should take pride from that. It means they're on the back foot. And ladies and gentlemen, as the outspoken Marxists on the platform today, I've got to tell you, they've been on the back foot since 1917. 1917 changed the world forever. 1917 began the era of national liberation, the era of socialist revolution. That, believe it or not, is the era you still live in today, people. That's right. Woo! We live in that era. History doesn't move in straight lines. You can see the overall trajectory goes like this, but it goes like this to get there. The British bourgeoisie had its revolution in the 1640s, but they were still fighting rearguard actions to protect their rule. 100 years later. The power of the bourgeoisie was not consolidated for a whole 100 years. In human life terms, that feels like an eternity. Most of us don't get to see 100 years. In historical terms, it's the blink of an eye. We mustn't take the human lifespan view of things when we're assessing the success or the failure of a movement to move history forwards. History is moving forward very rapidly in historical terms. It's accelerating all the time. But of course, if you happen to be someone like I am, who left school in an era of what seemed like total defeat and reaction, it can seem as if the battle's over. Battle's not over. We can see that very clearly now. Garland was saying, it's the right time. It's the right time. He said there's a systemic problem. And Scott told us injustice must be fought. My view, comrades, is that Marxism is the weapon that makes sense of these things. It gives us the context we're missing. The comrade who spoke just before me, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, Syed, made a wonderful contribution, and he talked about context. There's a reason our ruling class tries to abstract everything and present it as if it doesn't have a context, because the context gives us the information we need to make sense of the world. And Marxism gives us deep context because it gives us a scientific understanding of what's going on underneath all these surface events that are very hard to make sense of, and are even harder to make sense of when you have to filter them through the bourgeois distraction machinery. Yes?
Yeah.
Don't spend your lives hooked to the bourgeois news machine, guys. It is there to distract, confuse, keep you busy, keep you looking the other way. The circus, was it Garland said, you can change the face of these presidents and nothing changes. The president's not in charge, people. I invite you to read The State and Revolution by Lenin. A very important work written more than 100 years ago that will make it perfectly clear to you why it is that changing the president doesn't change the system. It's the right time, yes. And as Comrade Raid said, Syed, sorry, I'm terrible with names. Comrade Syed said, you have to do it even when it's not the right time. I am something of a historical anomaly. I left school, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you too much information now, but I left school in 1990. You can work that out. It's horribly true. I became a Marxist in the mid-1990s when I was in my early 20s. At a time when everybody around me was in total agreement that that whole thing was dead. The whole world seemed to be going the other way. The bourgeoisie was triumphal. Ideologically, militarily, economically, they were sucking up the wealth of the former Soviet Union and the former Eastern European socialist republics. They were having a field day. They won the world. Yes? And they were preparing all the wars against all the people who were holding out against them. Now we can have everything our way. We are the new hegemon forever and ever. Amen. Where have you heard that before? But things have changed. Why? Why have things changed? Because capitalism doesn't do stability. And we're not just in early stage capitalism, we're in late stage capitalism. Read Lenin's work on imperialism, written 1916. A very pivotal book. When you read it, he's describing the world you live in, people. It doesn't read like something from a long time ago. It could have been written yesterday, because the contradictions he points out of late stage decaying, dying capitalism, they only got worse in the last 100 years. More pronounced, more extreme, more obscene. The inequality that is baked into the system of production for profit reaches a whole global level. with the imperialist system, which is capitalism gone global, the market gone global, every corner of the world a part of, connected to this huge machinery of extraction of wealth. And wealth, as time goes by under capitalism, creates a force of its own. It has a gravitational pull. Wealth naturally concentrates under a system of production for profit. I invite you to read Capital. It's quite readable.
Really?
Don't believe the people who tell you it isn't. It is. Back in the day, there were workers in Britain who were so motivated to know what was in that book, they used it to learn to read.
Wow.
Now that's motivation.
Wow.
If you want to know what's in it, you'll read it and you'll understand it. So I invite you to read it. Don't trust people who tell you what's in it. Read it for yourself. Don't be afraid of knowledge. What was I talking about? Inequalities. That period of stabilisation, most of you in this room aren't old enough to remember that the system was actually in a crisis at the time that the Soviet Union fell. The looting of the Soviet people's wealth gave the system a shot in the arm. But it's over. Crisis is endemic to capitalism gone global. Endemic. And therefore war is also endemic. Poverty, extreme and growing, constantly growing inequality is endemic to capitalism. This is capitalism business as usual. This is how it is. It's not an anomaly. It's how the system functions. The only way out is to remove the system entirely, to replace it with a planned economy. And we will get growth, meaningful growth, not profit margin growth. Growth, where people's lives get better, where people have meaningful things to do. Because we're no longer servicing the accumulated wealth, the drive for profit, and the drive for domination that comes with the drive for profit in the imperialist system. It's the right time. We're in a new era of struggle. Those of you who are aware of the work of the World Anti-Imperialist platform, which we founded only a year and a half ago, but which has already held 5 international conferences. Woo! And which is growing fast and becoming what it set itself out to be. We set the aim a year and a half ago in Paris, less than a year and a half ago, to be a world coordinating movement against imperialism. But of course, initially, we didn't have all the right contacts to make that a fact in reality. Increasingly, we're finding them. At our conference in Athens, there were many delegates from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, and from the USA. Something's shifting in the balance of forces, and people can feel it. Those of us who founded the platform, we felt it. We felt it after 24th of February 2022. When Russia launched that SMO to assist the anti-fascist national liberation self-defense war of the people in the Donbass, to defend Russia against the enemy that was fighting the people of the Donbass, against the fascism which is a mere tool of imperialist policy, as has been pointed out here today, as it has always been. It drew a line around the world. And it's become increasingly clear to people that the nature of this Third World War into which we are heading is between the US-led aggressive NATO imperialist bloc on the one hand, and the forces of socialism, national liberation, independence and sovereignty on the other.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
And you've got to pick a side. And this is what the platform's message is. There are two sides, and you have to be on one of them. And in particular, we're taking this message to the communist movement, because would you believe, in this era of peaceful development and, let's face it, retreat of progressive forces for many decades, many forces calling themselves anti-imperialist, calling themselves even communist, have taken on ruling class propaganda. They gave up studying their own ideology and began following behind in the wake of the apparently triumphal bourgeoisie. And they will repeat to us, Russia's aggressive, Russia's imperialist, China's aggressive, China's imperialist. They present no proof for these assertions, just as the ruling class present no proof. But, like I said in the beginning, just the fact that the imperialists have to dress up their agenda using our clothes is something we should take heart from. The sentiment of the popular masses is against imperialism. When the imperialists are mobilizing the people to their side, they're using the terminology of anti-imperialism to hoodwink the people into supporting them. Why? Because the masses, even here at home, in the heart of the biggest imperialist power on the planet, are against imperialism. And they know that. Whoop, losing my glasses. "24th of February 2022 is an important date. Like I said, it drew a line around the world. It set an example. It gave hope to struggling peoples who've been under the cosh for decades and retreating for decades. Many places where they had national liberation movements, where their leaders were assassinated, their movements have been crushed, they felt like they've been going backwards and backwards, are regrouping and they're taking heart. What happened in the Sahel in August this year? Where is the heart coming from? It's coming from the example that Russia has given the world about the real strength of the imperialists. They can't win. Even in Gaza, they can murder. They can destroy bravely from the air. Yeah, 2 miles high against people who have no air defense force, no air force, nothing to fire back that will reach those planes. The brave fighters of the IDF can massacre babies. Well done. What happens when they go in to Gaza in their shoes, in their armored vehicles? What happens to them? They can't win. It doesn't matter how many aircraft carriers the USA sends to the Mediterranean or anywhere else. The tide is turning. And the people all across the world are realizing it. They're realizing it. And these struggles have been going on a long time. They didn't start just now. But yes, a new wave of anti-imperialist action is rising. A new wave of anger. And it's being created by the crisis of the system itself. It can't provide for the masses. It impoverishes the masses. It offers them no future within the current system. If the current status quo remains, our future is pessimism. It's hopelessness, homelessness, joblessness, pointlessness, empty distractions, broken lives, broken communities, a total squandering of the potential, the creativity and the purpose of millions, billions of people around the planet. This is a system that can't make use of the most precious resource it has, human beings. This is a system where the people at the top, in order to justify to themselves their position as overlords of the world, have to believe that most of humanity is garbage. So it's okay that they're unemployed. It's okay to throw 100,000 Ukrainians into the trenches to see if Russia falls over. That's okay, it's a good investment. They don't even come back in body bags to the USA. They're buried in Europe somewhere. And when we run out of Ukrainians, well, we've got Poles, we've got people in the Baltics. We've been busy preparing the ground, creating our proxy armies. But why does the USA have to use proxy armies? Again, it's not a position of strength that they're using proxy armies.
Black gloves.
Because after Vietnam, they learned. They don't have the power to mobilize the people to fight these unjust, aggressive wars.
That's right.
Now, if you want to refute the idea that Russia and China, the DPRK, all these people are aggressive, that they build a big military because they want to conquer the world, of course, that's propaganda that kind of goes down in the West because we're used to that. We're used to living in countries where our armies are alienated from the people and used to project the power of our ruling class against the oppressed peoples abroad. So that's how we think of the armed forces. That's not how the Russian people think of their army. It's not how the Chinese people think of their army. And it's not how the soldiers in those armies think of what they do. Yes, they're big armies. Why? They need to defend themselves. Who from? From the imperialists who want to destroy them. In a world where imperialism exists, you cannot disarm.
Yep.
That's a truth.
You're right.
Look what happened to Libya.
Yep.
Look at North Korea.
Yep.
The DPRK is at the center of this axis of resistance. Don't be fooled by all the propaganda. 75 years they've been holding on to their socialist system, and they've performed miracles under the most incredibly hard situation. And when Korea is reunited, as I'm sure it's going to be, Korea is going to be a power in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Don't discount the DPRK people. They learned the lesson. All the sufferings the Korean people have been tortured by for the crime of trying to choose their own social system and run their own affairs. The millions of people, not only in the north but in the south as well, massacred for the crime of wanting socialism in their homeland. The Koreans have learned that they need to defend themselves in a world where they're surrounded by aggressive imperialism. And we should be glad that they learned that lesson. Very glad. They're acting not only on their own behalf, but on behalf of all of humanity. As are the People's Liberation Army of China. As are the military of Russia. Every time Russia is invited by a country, whether it's in the Middle East or Latin America, to send troops to help that country bolster itself against imperialist aggression, I cheer. That's a victory for our side. That's a defeat for imperialism. That is not proof that Russia is an imperialist power. That is proof that the forces against imperialism are learning the hard way they have to stand together. You know, the platform was created to meet the challenges of this new era. An era of growing struggle, national liberation struggle, class struggle. And we're building a real movement, not a talking shop, not a place of coming and respectfully delivering your conflicting papers and going home again and filing them in the drawer marked never to be looked at again. We see our role as coordinating the line of mass struggle in support of the military struggle that we are not in control of. But Scott's right. There's such a thing as a just war.
A sacred word.
Marxists are not pacifists for a reason. We want peace. We love humanity. We want a future of peace and prosperity for humanity. But we understand that our enemy is armed to the teeth. You don't defeat an aggressive, armed enemy by disarming. Don't believe the Gandhi hype. There were revolutionaries in India too.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Many of them murdered by the British. We can't be pacifists while the enemy is armed. We have to defend ourselves. If we don't defend ourselves, we are submitting to the tyranny of capital. We are saying, my future is in the dirt, and that's okay with me. Is that the response of a human being?
No!
No! To defend yourself is to defend your humanity. When you look at Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, you should shout for joy, people. That is an expression of Palestine's humanity, their refusal to be ground into the dirt, to be genocided out of existence. And they have reignited the resistance movement across the Middle East like nothing else could have done. It's rising up again in a new wave. And I am sure that not just Zionism is going to be brought down by this wave, but the whole of imperialist interference in the Middle Eastern region, which has been holding back the region for a century.
Yeah.
How am I doing for time, Elizabeth? Tell me when you've had enough of me, people. I got given a green light. You might be sorry.
We've got time. Okay, I'll keep pressing. Sorry.
You know, this crisis of imperialism is deeper and more catastrophic than any the system has seen before. And unlike in World War I and World War II, there's no imperialist power in the world today which is growing stronger and waiting in the wings to rescue the others when they fall. If it wasn't for the USA, after World War II, imperialism in Europe was finished. Communism would not have stopped at the Berlin Wall. It had gone all the way up to the English Channel, and very soon after that, probably beyond it. That's the truth of the balance of class forces in Europe at the end of World War II. After two huge conflagrations, the deep crises of the system, the incredible suffering of the people under the capitalist imperialist system, they were ready for socialism in all of Europe. The USA intervened. The US imperialism grew through the wars, and it grew after the war at the expense. It worked to resuscitate its rivals to a point, but it also grew at their expense. It displaced them as the major imperialist power. You know, it was British imperialism that decided Zionism would be a good tool in the Middle East for controlling Middle Eastern oil. It was a tool that was not aimed at the Palestinians. There's a horrible historical irony. The Palestinians just happened to be in the place where they put the Zionist project down. That put them on the forefront of the anti-imperialist struggle across the world. But it wasn't aimed at them, it was aimed at the whole region. Israel is an armed outpost of imperialism to control the oil of the Middle East. Britain created that project, but it got displaced by the USA because Britain was a failing imperialist power. And the USA was still a rising one. But everybody can see today that the USA is a failing, decaying imperialist power. The strength it once had The moral superiority is gone. Gone forever. It's not coming back. There's no something waiting in the wings to rescue them from this crisis. So there's a real opportunity in front of us in this coming wave. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean it's not going to be a hell of a fight. They've got a lot of resources. And a dying wild beast is at its most dangerous. So don't underestimate the power of the enemy, but don't overestimate it either. And don't underestimate the historical moment we stand in. Take confidence, take heart. You might feel in the USA, you're in a small group of people who are kind of on the fringe of political life. But we're living in times where small movements, if they're positioned right, if their line is right, if their message is right, will grow. And big movements will disappear. I can see that's a message that resonates. You would say that, Joti, wouldn't you? Your party's tiny, no one in Britain's ever heard of you. Well, it's true. It's true. The ruling class in my country has been extremely efficient in making sure nobody knows the name of our party or anything that we do. Social media's been very good at crushing our algorithms and shadow banning us and making it so if you waste your time on Twitter, you're talking to nobody, you know, all that stuff that they have, you know, they got the handles on a bunch of stuff. And yet still our message is getting through. Because it's the right message. Needs to be heard. You know, it was very interesting to me when this arrest happened last weekend, incitement to racial hatred people for telling the truth. These are historical facts. We didn't make them up. We're not trying to generate a shock horror story here. There's a connection between Zionism and Nazism. There's a philosophical connection because they're both supremacist, racist ideologies. To say that Zionism represents the Jewish people is like saying Nazism represents the German people.
Wow, yeah.
Is it anti-German to speak against Nazism?
No. It's pro-German.
It's pro-people, right? Yeah. Pro-humanity. Yeah. For the sake of Jewish people themselves, even for the sake of Jewish people in Israel, those fools who made a pact with the devil, that's what they did. Yeah. In return for a privileged existence off the backs of the Arab peoples, they made a deal to do the dirty work of the USA, as Garland said, behind the glove. Yep. Yes? Yep. To do the dirty work of imperialism in suppressing the national liberation aspirations of all the Arab and Middle Eastern peoples. Yep. That's the job they've been playing. But what's the price they've paid? To dehumanize others, you must first dehumanize yourself. Yep. When you bring up your children to hate, what kind of a parent are you? Yep. When you take your kids to watch the bombing of Gaza like it's a spectator entertainment, to sign bombs, little kids, they don't know what you're doing to them, but they will be a product of that system. They have the cheek to talk about Israeli civilians. The Israeli so-called civilians, all of them armed to the teeth, have a choice. They chose to come and create this settler, colonial, supremacist, racist project. The Palestinian people didn't have a choice. They were not consulted. And yet, the bourgeois media hounds every supporter of Palestine. Do you condemn Hamas? I'm with Scott. Why is that question so hard? Sorry, I was about to swear there. Why is that question so hard? No, we do not condemn the just resistance of the Palestinian people. We support it. In fact, we want it to win. Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
And that, comrades, is the difference between our brand of anti-imperialist, anti-war work and the peacenik pacifist brand. The pacifist says, oh, violence is bad. But we don't live in a world of abstract truths. We live in a world of concrete realities. Yes, violence is nasty. It would be really nice to live in a world without it. How do we get there? We get there, I'm afraid, through struggle, including armed struggle. There are holocausts every year of starving children around the world whose families have been impoverished because of the extraction of the wealth of their countries by the imperialist superpowers. Is that not violence?
Exactly.
Is that peace? These struggles are all connected. Garland said it. The struggle for economic justice and the struggle for peace are the same struggle. We understand that there's a process to defeating this inhumane, decadent, bloodthirsty system. And it requires organization, it requires struggle. And it requires us to bring this understanding to the masses that they have a job to do. Solidarity is not a piece of paper. It's not clicking like or swipe or whatever the things we do on social media feeds. It's not keeping up with the news. Solidarity means organizing resistance where you are that helps our shared cause. So that could be organizing a revolutionary movement that keeps your rulers so busy at home they don't have time to rampage around the world. It can also be doing everything possible to interfere with the functioning of the aggressive war machine. Our program on the platform is a practical one. We want to coordinate that action. We want to bring that message to the masses. In the end, it's not the rulers of this world who fight the wars. It's working people. It's working people who make the munitions, who ship them from port to port and on the railways, on the roads. It's working people who print the propaganda, who press the buttons to broadcast it or upload it to the internet, who put it out on the shelves in the shops. All these people can be mobilized collectively to refuse to let the war machine function. Refuse to let the imperialists feel like they can do what they want and it's business as usual, and everybody as an isolated individual says, well, what can I do? I don't support it, but what can I do? Our job is to show people they have power that cannot be ignored if we learn to harness it. And alongside the message of organisation for non-cooperation, mass non-cooperation, not individual consumer choices, people, mass non-cooperation, disruption, is the understanding that this is a shared struggle. We have a side and we need to work for the victory of the resistance forces. Thank you very much.